As the Senior Bowl and the Shrine Bowl wrap up, it's time to take a look at some of the sleepers going into the NFL draft. I know the draft is a little bit of ways away. We still have to get the NFL combine, but it's time to take a look at the guys that really have made a name for themselves this week, or some guys that maybe are still under the radar. We take a look at who are the biggest sleepers and the guys that could impress when it comes to the draft and in the future when they actually start playing. Quarterback is fun because we'll all talk about the top four. We talk about the four big names, but there are a lot of names that are sleepers that really can make some noise and have really successful NFL careers. Two guys at the quarterback position. We're talking about two at each position. Jake Haener starts it off. I am a big fan of Jake Haener. I have been for a couple years now. The toughness in which he displays in the games is really unmatched. There aren't many quarterbacks that are as tough as him. You see some of the hits that he's taken in his career. He has been one of the most phenomenal players in the Mountain West in his tenure there at Fresno State. He is someone who maybe doesn't have the strongest arm. We've kind of seen some instances, some examples of that at the Senior Bowl practices this week, but he's someone that I think could be really fun to watch at the NFL level. I think that he has the talent and the toughness to be able to compete at the next level, and that's really going to help him. Jaren Hall is another guy, undersized. Both these guys are undersized, but can make some really nice throws. I think that he's a creative player. We've seen that at BYU in his 2 years as a starter. He's been very successful with his ability to work outside of the box, work outside of the pocket, and make some plays. I think these are two guys that you really need to keep an eye on when you're maybe not talking about day one or day two. Running back is full of potential sleepers, and I think that this group has some solid depth. It's just a matter of the ceiling in which they can reach. Kendre Miller was one of the most underrated running backs in college football this year on a team that played for a national championship. TCU really thrived when he was running the football, and at times it felt like they almost forgot about him, and the offense struggled. Now, he has shown that he has good balance and good vision in between the trenches. He just maybe doesn't have that speed that a lot of guys do. So he's going to be someone that's going to benefit from being physical and maybe not trying to run away from people, but it's just a matter of, does that limit his career? I think that he's a potentially exciting player at the next level. He just doesn't have that speed that maybe you would like. A guy who does have that speed is Keaton Mitchell. I think he is one of the bigger sleepers in the draft because of his ability to play at a high level, both in the run game and the pass game. I think that even though he's kind of undersized for a back, he kind of looks at that, maybe that Darren Sproles role that everybody talks about. 5'9", 184 pounds isn't anything physically imposing, but he's someone who has tremendous speed. Throw him out in the open field too, and you got someone who's a potential to score a touchdown on any single play. Another group full of potential sleepers is the wide receiver position. Two guys that really stand out to me. Tyler Scott has been getting more eyes on his film, and you're seeing scouts that have seen that, and they're seeing what everybody else has seen for a little while now. You're seeing someone who has good speed, his ability to separate from his defenders. Now, he didn't play in an offense that was, exactly the most pass friendly until maybe last year, but I think that he's someone that could make a name for himself at the next level. He just has to work on certain things. He's not the biggest guy either, so that's gonna something that he may have to add a little bit of weight to his frame, but someone who has the speed and separation to be able to thrive. Demario Douglas was one of the best players this week we've seen at practices, and he's someone that really made a name for himself. Another guy with maybe size concerns. His ability to separate isn't as good as Tyler Scott's, but I think that his hands are great. His ability to accelerate in and out of cuts. I think that you're looking at someone who's very exciting, has a lot of potential, someone who can make, you look at what Cooper Cup's been able to do, a smaller school guy that can make a big name. Now, I'm not saying Demario Douglas is going to be Cooper Cup, but kind of that similar thing where not many people are paying attention to him, but he's making a name for himself so far. Tight ends are fun because there's a lot of options as well. Maybe not as many as the wide receivers or the running backs, but there's some underrated players, especially when you talk about FCS players. Tucker Kraft is one of those guys that doesn't get a ton of attention yet because he played for South Dakota State. I don't think many people were watching South Dakota State, a team that won the FCS national championship this year, and Tucker Kraft is a big reason why. Now, his stats don't really pop, but he is someone that is a well-balanced player. We talked about some of the tight ends in this class and how balanced some of them are. Tucker Kraft is one of those guys, has good size, and it's just going to be, can he elevate his game to the next level of competition that he'll face? Brenton Strange from Penn State doesn't get a ton of attention. I think Penn State kind of flew under the radar this year, but Brenton Strange has that size that you really want in a tight end. And again, another guy whose numbers didn't really pop, but he's someone that can catch the ball really well. I think his hands are really good, and his ability to create after the catch is really what's going to separate him. So it's going to be fun to see how these two improve and how they really thrive, especially because maybe Tucker Kraft goes day 2, but Brenton Strange is a guy who's probably a day 3 guy, someone who can make some noise when teams are passing on him. Offensive line has been under the spotlight as usual, and guys like Warren McClendon don't typically fall under the sleeper category, but because most people aren't really putting him in that day 1, day 2, he is someone who could really rise up quickly. But right now, I think he's still relatively low on the boards. I think that he is still a phenomenal talent, someone that could make a name for himself in the next few months, and someone who can make a name for himself when training camp comes around. A 6'4", 300 pounds. I like his strength, his agility, lateral agility to reach guys, and I think that really helps him. There's just some little technical things that maybe he needs to work on to get even better. Then when you go in deeper sleeper, I think you're looking at Jalen Thomas from SMU, someone who has versatility, played multiple positions for SMU. Now, doesn't have the length that maybe you'd like, someone who's still working on, hand placement, punches, that kind of stuff. But the fact that he's played multiple positions gives him some value. Maybe he's going to play guard at the next level, I believe, because of that length concern. But he is someone who is experienced, who has plenty of experience at different positions, and that's going to help him with his next team. Jose Ramirez is an Eastern Michigan player who really just came out of nowhere this year. I think that outside of Eastern Michigan, not many people knew who he was, and he really thrived this year. You look at his production, 19 and a half tackles for loss, 12 sacks. His power really stands out, and I think that people are seeing that this week. You look at what he's been able to do at practices. He's someone that I think really made a name for himself. Maybe not as much as some other guys, but people definitely now have him on their radar. Someone who's maybe not day 1, day 2, but in day 3, you're getting someone who's going to be a competitor. Tyler Lacey is interesting to me from Oklahoma State simply because he has a lot of good things about him, but the question is, do you have a lot of great things about you, or do you have some great things about you? I think that you saw his ability to move inside and outside for Oklahoma State's defensive line. That was a very talented defensive line, but I don't know if he proved to be elite any of those things. I think he's a really good player. He just has to show that he can be either an inside player or an outside player. Now, if he's able to elevate his game for both, obviously that's the most ideal, but I think it's someone who is still working on what is he elite at, what is he great at, instead of just being really good at everything. That might keep him in the league for a while, but eventually you're going to need to find something that's really good that helps you stand apart from the rest of the guys. Linebacker was fun too. There's a lot of exciting names, a lot of sleeper picks, honestly. And Nick Hampton has to stand out first. Whether he's playing linebacker, whether it's a 3-4 linebacker, he's playing on the edge, I think that he has tremendous potential just because of his explosiveness and his length. You look at his production he produced at Appalachian State, you're looking at someone who has very exciting potential just based off those raw traits. Now, his size isn't exactly what you would like for someone competing in the trenches, but that's something that an NFL team can fix. You can build up that frame, you can build it into something that he wants. Now, the developmental upside is there. It's just a matter of can he get there? And then when you look at Drake Thomas, a guy who, again, you're looking at someone who maybe doesn't have, it's kind of the opposite of Nick Hampton, doesn't have the length that maybe you'd want, maybe not the speed or explosiveness that you would want, but he plays the game the right way. He's aggressive with his reads, he's aggressive with how he plays, and his motor doesn't stop. That's something that's really hard to beat, is someone who won't quit. And Drake Thomas is someone who's going to fill that role. He's going to give the defense energy. It just comes down to, can he handle playing in the trenches at the next level? Now, when you look at the one-on-one drills, you'd see most of the wide receiver clips because most people like to pay attention to offense, but there were some exciting players on defense. You saw some exciting plays, and there's some sleepers that we really need to pay attention to a little bit more. Riley Moss is a very interesting one because he was uber productive at Iowa, and a lot of people are pinning him to be a safety, and that very well may be where he ends up. But I think he's going to get a chance at corner first, and that is some experience that he brings in that's really exciting. The ball skills are there. I think the toughness when competing with wide receivers that maybe has an advantage on him size wise is something that really helps him. He's maybe not going to win every single one, but I think that he is someone you can't really give up on. You can't really just move on from, because he's going to give you his all at that position. And if he plays safety, then he's going to give it his all in a position. It doesn't really matter where he goes. Now, when you look at Rajon Wright, someone from, if you remember Last Chance U when they're at Laney College, he is someone that really stood out in that series, and he's finding a name for himself at the next level after being really good at Oregon State. Now, there are natural instincts that you really like. I think that he's uber competitive. You see that in his game. He is someone that's going to fight and claw his way to be successful. And I think that's really exciting for anybody that takes him, any NFL team that's going to take him. And it's just a matter of finding a way to develop him more. I think that you're talking about the cornerback position. There is a lot of size at the cornerback position this year. There's a lot of guys that are 6'1", 6'2", and with good size too. They're not 6'2" and 180 pounds. Rajon Wright's 6'2", 200 pounds. He brings good length. He brings good weight to his frame. I think that he is someone, if you're not going to get one of the top corners, which there's quite a few, you can still get a guy like Rajon Wright later in the NFL draft, and that's someone who could be a starter for you. Finally, we look at safety, and Sidney Brown to me is an interesting player because he's not, that we talked about those corners that were 6'1", 6'2". Sidney Brown comes in at 6 feet, which isn't short by any means, but he also brings in a 200-pound frame. I think that his athleticism and versatility in Illinois' defense is really what's going to help him at the next level. Now, it may not help his draft stock as much, but he's someone that can play the game really well. I think that he brings a good mentality when trying to stop the run, even defending the pass. He is someone that's very exciting, a big reason why Illinois was so successful. Then you flip over to Quindell Johnson, a bigger sleeper, in my opinion, someone who has scheme versatility. I think that what he did for Memphis's defense through multiple different defensive coordinators really needs to be, you really need to give him credit for, because he learned new systems and he still was able to make a ton of plays. He led Memphis in tackling 2 years ago, and he's someone that has been one of the most consistent players, if not the most consistent player for Memphis. Now, his size is maybe not what you would like, and maybe he doesn't have the agility that you prefer, but he is someone that's going to make big plays. And that's the whole thing with sleepers. They're going to make some plays here and there. It's just a matter of consistency. Now, there's a few traits that maybe they don't have that the elite players do, but they're going to make a name for themselves because they are the underdogs. They're going to have a chip on their shoulder, and it's going to be fun to see how their journey ends.